Good day, everyone. Today, we are here to present to you our study entitled Learning Styles and Strategies of Education Students in the New Normal. We come up with this title because as we experience in today's new normal of education on how the students learn based on online learning and how they deal with it. Due to the widespread of COVID-19 pandemic, it has caused widespread disruption such as school closures and a global recessions. It forces the DepEd to implement the new normal education system based on DepEd Order Number 12 Series of 2020 to adapt the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, ensuring the continuity of the learning process of the students. From kindergarten to post-secondary education, learning styles-based education focuses on auditory and visual learners and is prevalent practice by Lench 2015 and Newton 2015. Furthermore, Chang 2005 said that some learn better using drawings and diagrams, which is the visual learners, among a group of learnings. Others acquire knowledge faster through participation or the participative learners or the kinesthetic learners. Some people respond well to visual information while others learn actively and independently by Fielder and Sparlin 2005. In this light, the researchers came up with a study to identify BEd students' learning styles and tactics with the present situation. Each student has a unique learning style. Identifying preferences and strategies would add to the current knowledge about their impact and relationship to academic performance improvement. In general, how students study in the new standard education impacts their academic progress in a subject. Scope and delimitation of the study was conducted from August to September 2021 among the first year and second year BEd students of Isabela State University, Kawayan Campus. The study focused on finding the learning strategies and learning styles utilized during the new normal. This study included only first year and second year BEd students since this group was subjected to pure online learning.
Let's proceed to the conceptual framework. BEd students is the independent variables which focuses to first year and second year students, while the independent variables are learning styles such as visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile, individual, and group, while the learning strategies which included motivation and metacognitive strategies. In this regard, this study will help to determine if there is a significant relationship between the learning styles among BEd students when they are in a group or learning individually. This study also seeks to find what learning strategies are utilized when grouped according to their profile variables. Statement of the problem. This study aims to examine students' learning styles and strategies amidst pandemics. Specifically, it aims for number 1, what is the level of students' learning styles preferences in terms of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile, individual, and group? Number 2, what is the students' function-based learning strategy in terms of motivation strategy and metacognitive strategy? Number 3, is there a significant relationship between the number of learning style preferences and the function-based learning strategy of students?
Now, let's move on to Chapter 3, Research Methodology. Research method and technique used. The study utilized a descriptive quantitative design for gathering the data and information. Descriptive research is a type of research that focuses on describing the features of the population or phenomenon being investigated. Research setting and participants. The study was administered in Isabela State University through a survey questionnaire. Sampling techniques. To develop the sample of the present research under review, the method of purposive sampling, also known as judgmental sampling and purposive visual sampling, was utilized. Purposive sampling is a sampling method that is characterized by a deliberate effort to obtain representative samples from a study population. Population and sample size. 100 BEd students enrolled in Isabela State University served as respondent for the survey questionnaire. Instrument of the study. 2 self-report questionnaires were employed to collect quantitative data. The perceptual learning styles preferences developed by Reid 1984. The second part of the questionnaire is the learning strategies for college students questionnaire. Is a self-administered questionnaire developed by Cabrera et al. 2007. It was based on a 5-point Likert scale ranging from 1, which is never, 2, rarely, 3, sometimes, 4, often, and 5 is always. Next is data collection. In the gathering the study data, permission was first secured from the research advisor. The questionnaire were adapted from various authors, modified, underwent content validation, and administered directly to the chosen respondents of the study. For further clarifications, the researchers contacted the respondents if any question regarding their answers. Data analysis. The gathered data were tabulated, tallied, categorized, and interpreted using descriptive statistics, specifically frequency, weighted mean, percent, standard deviation, and chi-square tests. Simple tables, frequencies, percentages, and the weighted mean were utilized to present and analyze the data generated in the subsequent chapter of this study. The statistical tool frequency count is used to determine the learning strategies used by BEd students indicated in the table 1. Percentage distribution is used to get the profile of students, which is their sex, age, and ethnicity in figure 1, 2, and 3, and also to determine the learning styles use of the students indicated in figure 4. Weighted mean was used to identify the metacognitive and motivational strategies utilized by the students that can be seen in tables 2 and 3. In table 4 and 5, chi-square test is used to determine the p-value of motivational and metacognitive strategies.
Let's now move on to Chapter 4, Results and Discussion. This chapter shows the results of the data gathered. In addition, it reveals the underlying problems under the investigation. The study reveals the relationship between the strategies and learning styles of BEd students. Consequently, further information about assessing the motivational and metacognitive strategies was recognized. The results were based on the answers to the questionnaires distributed to the selected respondents. Results of other studies were used as inputs in the interpretation of results. Let's now proceed to Figure 2, Percentage Distribution of Sex of BEd Students. The figure shows the total number of BEd students who actively answered the survey questionnaires investigating the learning strategies and learning styles. There was a total of 100 respondents. The result implies that most respondents were female, with 84% while male respondents were only 16%. Figure 3. Percentage distribution of age of BEd students. The figure reveals that most of the respondents were aged 17 to 19 years old with a mean percentage of 94%, while the remaining respondents aged 20 to 21 years old with a mean ratio of 6% out of 100% of students. The result implies that the female 17 to 19 years old is the majority of the respondents with 94 greater than 6. Figure 4. Percentage distribution of ethnicity of BEd students. The percentage distribution of ethnicity of BEd students who genuinely engage in the survey questionnaires studying learning techniques and learning styles is depicted in Figure 4. The results reveal that 70% of respondents were Ilocano, 25% were Tagalog, 2% were Ibanag, and the rest of the region had a mean proportion of a percent. Let's now proceed to the student learning style preferences. Table 1. Learning strategies used by BEd students. Table 1 shows that most BEd students prefer visual learning style, which obtained 21 counts, followed by group learning style, which received 19 points. Furthermore, some students prefer auditory to kinesthetic and tactile, with just 7 and 6 counts respectively. This corroborates Singh et al.'s 2015 findings that the visual type of learning is the most preferred by students. Students prefer to study through notes, charts, maps, graphs, films, videos, and other visual aids since they have a strong sense of color, visuals, diagrams, etc. This study outcome is also consistent with the findings of Maya and Rao 2004, who found that a large percentage of students tend to be visual learners. In contrast, a small percentage appears to be tactile learners. Figure 5. Percentage distribution of learning styles used by BEd students. The percentage distribution of learning methods employed by BEd students is depicted in Figure 5. The majority of students exclusively use one learning approach, either visual, tactile, auditory, kinesthetic, individual, or group, making up 65% of the respondents. Following that, 20% and 15% of students utilize 2 and 3 techniques, respectively, 15%. One single approach to teaching does not work for every student or even for most students. The educator's awareness of the various learning styles of the students and their efforts toward matching the teaching and learning styles may help create an effective environment for all the students. Karb et al. 2013. Let's now proceed to Table 2, Motivational Strategies of BEd Students. As shown in the table, BEd students' function-based strategy in terms of motivational strategy in Statement 3 and 17 weighted mean scores of 4.01 and standard deviations of 0.948, 0.916 respectively, with a qualitative indicator of very high. The rest of the statements, a qualitative indicator high. The highest is Statement 15 with a mean score of 3.96. Overall, the component motivational strategies varies from very high to high. As a result, the study reveals that the motivational method utilized by the students was high, with an overall mean of 3.73 and a standard deviation of 0.709, and with a qualitative indicator of high. Table 3. Metacognitive strategies utilized by BEd students. As shown in the table, the component Metacognitive strategy, all the statements got a high. Statement 3 got the highest mean scores, 3.92, followed by Statement 2 with a mean scores of 3.87 respectively. Overall, the component metacognitive strategy only varied from high. It has a mean score of 3.74 and the standard deviation equal to 0.891 with a qualitative indicator high. Metacognitive thinking is an essential component of learning because it explains how conditions should be controlled and monitored. Based on cognitive knowledge and abilities, the metacognitive technique established learning awareness as a precondition for planning, monitoring, managing, assessing, and automating the learning process. Sir, 2019. Next is relationship between the number of learning style preferences and function-based learning strategy of students. Table 4. Motivational strategies utilized by BEd students. As you can see in the presentation, correlation is significant at the 0.05 level. As seen in the table, the p-value is 0.633, more significant than the alpha threshold of 0.05. This implies no correlation between learning styles and students' motivating techniques. As a result, the null hypothesis is rejected. Lastly, Table 5. Metacognitive strategies utilized by BEd students. The same may be said of metacognitive strategies. The alpha value is higher than the p-value, which is 0.142. This suggests no correlation between learning styles and students' metacognitive methods. As a result, the null hypothesis is rejected. The results mentioned above contradict Saraggard and Abashian 2016 findings, who discovered a significant link between language learning strategies and perceptual learning styles.
Chapter 5 Summary of Findings, Conclusions, and Recommendations. First is the summary of findings. Education is a process of purposive, conscious or unconscious, psychological, sociological, physiological, and scientific learning that brings development to every learner to their fullest extent and the development of a society they live in. Therefore, every student needs education in order to learn and adopt new styles. The aim of this research is to know different learning styles and strategies of education students during their class. The researchers of this study are fully aware of how important the learning styles and strategies for the students while facing this new normal in education wherein students are studying even there is a pandemic. The researchers aim to finish this research study to provide good, reliable, and valid information that may help the students, teachers, schools, and parents in coping up with this new normal in education. This study aims to know the learning styles and strategies of education students in the new normal. Specifically, it aims to know the level of students' learning style preferences in terms of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile, individual, and group. Also, it aims to identify the students' function-based learning strategy in terms of motivation strategy and metacognitive strategy. In addition, this study used descriptive type of research. This type of research aims to describe education students' learning style and strategies since each student has a unique learning style. It describes also the preferences
and strategies would add to the current knowledge about their impact and relationship to academic performances improvement. The participants of this study are 100 B.Ed students, first year and second year students enrolled in Isabela State University. The researchers use an adapted and modified questionnaires and checklists from various authors who serve as an instrument for the study, which is the two self-report questionnaires were employed to collect quantitative data. First is the Perceptual Learning Style Preferences Questionnaire, or the PLSQ, developed by Reed 1984. And the second part of the questionnaire is the Learning Strategies for College Students Questionnaire, or the LSCSQ. It is a self-administered questionnaire developed by Cabrera et al. 2007. Moreover, the overall results will be summarized according to the statement of the problem. So the following are the statement of the problem. First is, what is the level of students' learning style preferences in terms of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile, individual, and group? Obviously, today's generation are more familiar and interested in this type of learning. Even the students who have not experienced a new normal setting, they show a promise in terms of visual learning method. Respondents have shown their affirmation in new normal education, and to cope up with they see, watch, or interact with a certain thing, and they find it as the most convenient time. Students may plan their time in a way that suits them best, and they can quickly acquire the knowledge they desire. This corroborates with Singh et al.'s 2015 findings that the visual type of learning is the most preferred by the students. Students prefer to study through notes, charts, maps, graphs, films, videos, and other visual aids, since they have a strong sense of color, visuals, diagrams, etc. So this study outcome is also consistent with the findings of Maya and Rao. So Maya and Rao 2004, who found that a large percentage of students tend to be visual learners. In contrast, a small percentage appears to be tactile learners. So the second question to be answered is, what is the student's function-based learning strategy in terms of motivational strategy and metacognitive strategy? The first one is the metacognitive strategy. So motivation is defined as a theoretical construct to explain the initiation, direction, intensity, persistence, and quality of behavior, especially goal-directed behavior. In this study, it is associated with B.Ed students' cognitive and affective process on situated and interactive interaction between them and their learning environment, in accordance to the contextual and social factors as enablers or barriers. The motivation of B.Ed students are described as an engine of learning, affects in what, how, and when of learners' social interaction. Therefore, a lack of motivation to focus on the study-related tasks is a common stumbling block. As a result, students must manage their motivation to attain their academic goals, mainly when appealing choices. Students can utilize several motivation regulation strategies, or the self-regulatory strategies that control and boost motivation to regulate their cause. Next one is the metacognitive strategy. So metacognitive focuses on the knowledge and thinking ability of the learners and their capacity to understand interconnectedness and the complexity of the world they live in. It gains insights about a global justice in terms of social, political, and economic structure which are grounded on injustice and power differences. Metacognitive thinking is an essential component of learning because it explains how cognition should be controlled and monitored. Based on cognitive knowledge and abilities, the metacognitive techniques establishes learning awareness as a precondition for planning, monitoring, managing, assessing, and automating the learning process. So as a result of metacognitive strategies, learners should employ the metacognitive method to self-regulate and manage their behavior. Lastly, the third question is there a significant relationship between the number of learning style preferences and the function-based learning strategy of students? So according to the results, the p-value is 0.633, more significant than the alpha threshold of 0.05. This implies no correlation between the number of learning styles and students' motivating techniques. As a result, the null hypothesis is rejected. It is the same to metacognitive strategies that the alpha value is higher than the p-value, which is 0.142. This suggests no correlation between the number of learning styles and students' metacognitive methods. As a result, the null hypothesis is rejected also. The next part of Chapter 5 is conclusion. So according to the result of the discussion and the findings of our study, most are Ilocana B.Ed female students whose age is 17 to 19 years old. Most of the B.Ed female students is active on their new normal class. Compared to male students, they are not highly engaged themselves in creating new learning styles and strategies. They have lack of motivation and prepare it on face-to-face. That's why their performance is not high, unlike the female students who got high scores on their examinations, strategies, activities, and discussions. And the last part of Chapter 5, which is recommendations. As the pandemic continues, its effects continues to every people. By this understanding, the learning styles and strategies of education students in the new normal is really a struggle to contain because of COVID-19, which we are confronted with a new pandemic of educational system. Protecting and recreating education must be top priorities as countries, regions, and cities navigate this transition. It should develop a bold, swift initiative to enhance economic activity and recreate a good strategies and teaching techniques for each at-risk school and universities. Since there is no face-to-face learning, we need to move in reopening phase, which strike the balance between allowing students to have a good satisfaction and performance in the new normal class. They will also need to find the right balance and sequencing of health, educational system, and social policy interventions to produce sustainable outcomes and implement and sustain policy interventions at the necessary scale in the context of increasingly constrained knowledge funding for students. Specific measures will be required to address rising inequality and the uneven impact of the crisis to make each universities and schools fairer and more equitable to the system in terms of educating each student. So thank you for listening to our presentation entitled Learning Styles and Strategies of Education Students in the New Normal.